In the NFL, power has always been simple. Owners write the checks, players follow the rules. But what happens when that balance quietly breaks? What happens when a quarterback walks into the building already richer than the people signing his contract? That question is exactly why the league feels uneasy right now. Because this isn't just about football anymore, it's about control. And according to reports circulating behind the scenes, that control may already be slipping. The situation centers on Shedeur Sanders, a rookie who hasn't even taken a meaningful snap yet, but is already forcing conversations the NFL never wanted to have. Rumors suggest tensions escalated after details surfaced about a luxury fashion partnership tied to what he wears on the field. Not jerseys, not helmets, shoes. Something as small as cleats allegedly triggered a much bigger reaction because it symbolized something owners fear more than bad contracts or missed throws: independence. And here's the part that rattles people the most. This wasn't some reckless move. It wasn't accidental. Reports claim his camp was prepared for the backlash, prepared for fines, prepared for pushback, because when money isn't your lifeline, punishment loses its bite. That's what makes this story different. The NFL has systems designed to humble players early. Draft slides, rookie wage scales, image pressure. It usually works, but this time it didn't land the way it was supposed to. Instead of shrinking, the spotlight got brighter. Instead of falling in line, the brand got louder. And instead of fighting for leverage, Shedeur may have already moved past needing it. Because when a player's influence stretches beyond the field into fashion, culture, and global attention, the league isn't just managing an athlete anymore. They're negotiating with a business. And that's where the real fear begins, because if this model works once, it can work again. It sounds almost ridiculous at first. Out of everything happening around Shedeur Sanders, the tension reportedly didn't start with his arm talent, his draft position, or even his personality. It started with shoes. According to reports circulating online, the issue wasn't whether he could play. It was what he planned to wear on his feet when he did. Rumors suggest Shedeur's growing relationship with Amiri included custom-designed cleats meant to match the luxury image he's been building off the field. On the surface, that sounds harmless. Players have custom gear all the time. But this wasn't just style. It allegedly collided head-on with the NFL's long-standing uniform and sponsorship structure, which is tightly aligned with Nike. That's when the temperature reportedly changed. Insiders claim league officials and team executives saw the cleats as more than footwear. They saw a precedent. If one rookie could walk in and bend branding rules, what happens when 10 more follow? What happens when players stop treating league sponsors as mandatory and start treating them as optional? This is where the panic reportedly set in. Because the problem wasn't that Shedeur wanted custom cleats. The problem was that, according to speculation, he didn't need the NFL's approval badly enough to back down. Fines, suspensions, public criticism, those tools only work when the league controls the paycheck. And in this case, reports suggest the money conversation was already upside down. That's what made this situation feel different behind closed doors. This wasn't a rookie testing boundaries because he didn't know better. This was someone allegedly prepared to absorb consequences because his income didn't depend solely on Sundays. And symbolically, that terrified people. Shoes became a stand-in for something much larger: autonomy, control over image, control over brand, control over value. The NFL has always sold uniformity as professionalism. Same logos, same rules, same hierarchy. But luxury branding doesn't work that way. It thrives on exclusivity and individual identity. If reports are even partially accurate, this was the first clear sign that Shedeur wasn't interested in fitting into the traditional player mold. He wasn't trying to break rules loudly. He was quietly signaling that the rules no longer defined him. And once that signal was sent, there was no putting it back in the box. Because if the league couldn't control the shoes, what else were they about to lose control of next? Draft night is designed to put players in their place. It's the NFL's quiet reset button. Months of hype get filtered through phone calls, draft boards, and closed-door opinions, and by the end of the night, the league tells you exactly what it thinks you're worth. For Shedeur Sanders, that message was supposed to be loud and humbling. Leading up to the draft, the tone shifted fast. Anonymous scouts suddenly started talking. Reports claimed he was entitled. Others questioned his body language, some whispered that he wasn't a real leader. The critiques felt vague, personal, and conveniently timed. They weren't breaking down film anymore, they were shaping a narrative. Then draft night arrived and the slide began. Pick after pick went by, teams filled quarterback needs. Cameras kept cutting back, waiting for the moment his name would finally be called. It didn't happen in the first round, or the second, or the third. Each pause sent a clearer signal. This wasn't just about football, this was a message. By the time he fell into the later rounds, the internet did what it always does. Critics laughed, rivals posted jokes, pundits rushed to declare the prime effect officially over. They framed it as exposure, proof that the hype had finally collapsed under pressure. A late-round rookie contract isn't glamorous. It's designed to shrink expectations and tighten control. Smaller guarantees, less leverage, a reminder that you're replaceable. The assumption was simple. Once reality set in, the noise would stop and he'd fall in line like everyone else. But that's where the miscalculation happened. What draft night failed to account for was timing. While teams were celebrating value picks and safe decisions, something else was happening quietly. The attention didn't disappear, it intensified. The debate didn't cool off, it multiplied, and instead of shrinking under the weight of criticism, his visibility grew. The slide was supposed to strip power away. Instead, it separated his value from the league's approval. He didn't come out of draft night desperate to prove he belonged. He came out controversial, talked about, and watched. And in today's landscape, attention isn't a side effect, it's currency. Draft night was meant to be the moment the story ended. Instead, it became the moment it pivoted. Because when the league tried to humble him publicly, it accidentally handed him something more useful than draft position. It handed him the spotlight. This is the part critics usually rush past. They hear the last name and stop thinking. They label it nepotism, roll their eyes, and move on. But that shortcut misses what's actually happening with Shedeur Sanders, because the advantage he inherited wasn't fame, it was information. Long before the draft, long before the endorsements, he grew up watching how the system really works. He saw how attention is created, how narratives are shaped, and how quickly public opinion can be flipped when you control the spotlight. That knowledge came from watching Deion Sanders, but it didn't stop there. Deion's era was about dominance through visibility. Flash, confidence, and being impossible to ignore on television. But Shedeur grew up in a different landscape. Television no longer decides who matters. Algorithms do, engagement does, viral moments do, and that's where the blueprint evolved. Instead of chasing approval, he leaned into relevance. Instead of letting critics define him, he let them amplify him. Every comment section meltdown, every hot take debate, every clip dissected on sports shows became free distribution. Not accidental, not emotional, strategic. That's why the nepotism argument doesn't really hold up under scrutiny. Plenty of famous athletes have kids, very few of them turn attention into leverage. The name might open a door, but it doesn't teach you how to stay in the room once the noise starts. That part is execution. What makes this blueprint dangerous, at least from the league's perspective, is that it doesn't rely on football success alone. Traditional power structures assume performance comes first, money comes later. But this model flips that order. If reports and patterns are accurate, Shedeur understood something early. In the modern era, relevance can outpace results. You don't have to be the starter to be the headline. You don't have to lead the league in stats to lead the conversation. And once you're leading the conversation, opportunities stop asking for permission from the scoreboard. That's the shift most people missed. He didn't reject football, he just refused to let football be the only pillar holding everything up. The league prepared to evaluate a quarterback. What they got instead was someone operating like a brand strategist. And when you realize that, the earlier moments start to make sense. The confidence, the comfort with criticism, the willingness to be polarizing, none of it was reckless, it was rehearsed. Because this wasn't improvisation. It was a blueprint refined for a new era, one where attention is power and power doesn't wait for validation. This is where the story reportedly takes a sharp turn, and it's also where things get uncomfortable for the league. Because if the rumors floating around business circles are even partially true, Shedeur Sanders isn't chasing endorsements the way most athletes do. He's allegedly chasing something far more powerful. Ownership. For decades, the formula has been simple. A brand offers an athlete a big check. The athlete wears the logo, posts a photo, and cashes out. Short-term money, short-term relationship. But reports claim Shedeur's camp has been pushing back on that model entirely. Instead of asking, "How much are you paying?" the question becomes, "How much do I own?" One of the most talked about rumors involves a major sports beverage giant, often mentioned in online speculation as Gatorade. According to unverified reports, a massive multi-year cash offer was floated early on. The kind of deal that would make most rookies sign without reading the fine print, but the story goes that the response wasn't an immediate yes. It was a counter. Rather than locking himself into a flat endorsement fee, reports suggest Shedeur's team explored equity-based structures, a stake instead of a paycheck, long-term upside instead of guaranteed cash. If true, that's a fundamental shift in how young athletes approach brand relationships, because equity doesn't just pay once, it compounds. And that's exactly why this idea scares traditional power structures. Cash deals keep athletes dependent. Equity makes them partners. When a player owns a piece of the machine, fines don't sting the same way, public criticism doesn't land as hard, and league leverage starts to weaken because the money isn't tied to performance clauses or snap counts. Now, it's important to be clear, none of these details have been officially confirmed. These are industry whispers, patterns observed, and deals discussed in speculative terms, but the behavior lines up, turning down quick money, prioritizing long-term brand control, aligning with companies that benefit from controversy and visibility. If this model is real, it represents a quiet rebellion against the endorsement system the NFL is comfortable with. Players aren't just billboards anymore, they're investors, and investors don't get told where to stand or what to wear nearly as easily. That's the real shift. The league can manage salaries, it can cap contracts, but it can't cap outside ownership without stepping into dangerous territory. And once a player realizes that difference, once they understand they don't need the league's money to survive, the balance of power changes permanently. Because at that point, you're no longer negotiating as an athlete. You're negotiating as a stakeholder. This might be the most misunderstood part of the entire story. People see the flash, the confidence, the viral clips, and assume it's ego. But what they're actually watching is someone who understands how modern power really works. Because in today's world, the algorithm is more valuable than approval. Shedeur Sanders doesn't treat social media like a side hobby, he treats it like infrastructure. Every post, every clip, every reaction is part of a feedback loop that turns attention into leverage. And the most important part, it works whether people like him or not. That's where the traditional sports world gets lost. Old school logic says criticism hurts your brand, but online criticism fuels it. Every angry comment boosts engagement. Every debate segment creates curiosity. Every viral clip, positive or negative, pushes his name deeper into feeds that would never watch a full game. The algorithm doesn't care about morality, it only cares about reaction. And reaction is exactly what he generates. When fans argue under his posts, the platform sees activity. When haters quote-tweet clips to complain, the clip travels further. When sports shows spend entire segments debating whether he's overrated, that conversation escapes sports media and enters culture. None of that costs him $1, it pays him. That's the ecosystem most people don't see. Anger becomes impressions. Impressions become ad revenue. Ad revenue attracts brands. Brands bring leverage. And suddenly, criticism isn't something to avoid, it's something to manage. This is why the negativity never seems to bother him. He doesn't rush to explain himself. He doesn't overcorrect. He lets the conversation spiral because every spiral feeds the machine. While critics think they're holding him accountable, they're actually doing distribution for free. Even the focus on football comments play into it. People watch the video just to say he shouldn't be posting videos. By the time they type that sentence, they've already boosted the reach, padded the analytics, and helped justify the next partnership. That's what makes this strategy so effective. It's platform agnostic. It doesn't depend on wins, losses, or depth charts. As long as people are watching, talking, and reacting, the engine keeps running. And unlike traditional media, no gatekeeper can shut it off. This is also why the league can't control it. You can fine uniforms, you can regulate contracts, you can't regulate engagement, you can't tell millions of people to stop clicking. And once a player understands that, once they realize attention itself is the asset, the balance of power shifts quietly but permanently. Because at that point, even silence from the league becomes fuel. And the algorithm never sleeps. This is the moment the conversation officially left football behind. Up until now, everything could still be brushed off as hype, speculation, or social media noise. Critics could say it was just talk, just clicks, just online drama. But when images started circulating from Paris, that excuse disappeared overnight. Because Paris isn't where athletes go to be marketed, it's where culture goes to be decided. When Shedeur Sanders appeared connected to luxury fashion events overseas, the message was unmistakable. This wasn't a cameo, this wasn't a quick photo op. This was alignment, the kind that brands reserve for people they believe represent the future, not just the moment. Reports and footage tied him and his brother to major fashion houses, including Amiri, and even appearances in spaces typically dominated by legacy names like Louis Vuitton. For NFL executives watching from home, this wasn't exciting. It was alarming. Because once a player is accepted in those rooms, the league is no longer the biggest platform in his life. Fashion doesn't care about depth charts. Runways don't ask for stat lines. Luxury brands invest in cultural gravity, not box scores. And Paris is where that gravity gets measured. The audience is global. The press is international. The impact stretches far beyond Sunday broadcasts. That's why the rumored valuation of his fashion partnerships caused such shock. Numbers floating around, unconfirmed but widely discussed, weren't rookie endorsement numbers. They were superstar lifestyle figures, the kind of money that reframes everything. Suddenly, football wasn't the engine, it was just one spoke on the wheel. And that's what truly changed after Paris. Because from that point forward, he wasn't being positioned as an NFL quarterback who happens to like fashion. He was being positioned as a cultural figure who happens to play football. That distinction matters. One is dependent on the league, the other is bigger than it. Luxury brands saw something the NFL couldn't control, a young audience, deep engagement, and authenticity that couldn't be manufactured. They didn't want him in pads. They wanted him as he was, confident, polarizing, and visible. For the league, this created a quiet nightmare scenario. How do you discipline someone whose value doesn't flow through you? How do you pressure someone whose biggest checks clear whether he starts or not? Paris answered those questions without saying a word. Because once the world sees you walking those runways, the power dynamic shifts permanently. The league might still own the field, but it no longer owns the spotlight. And after Paris, that spotlight clearly wasn't coming back. This is the part of the story that never gets said out loud in press conferences, but it's being whispered everywhere else. Because what's happening here isn't just about one player, it's about what he represents if this model keeps working. For decades, the NFL has been built on leverage. Owners hold the power because they control access, salaries, and career longevity. The draft tells you where to go. The rookie wage scale tells you what you're worth. And fines, incentives, and playing time are used to keep everything in line. That system only works when the league is the primary source of income. That's why Shedeur Sanders makes people uncomfortable. If reports and patterns are accurate, his financial ecosystem doesn't revolve around the NFL alone. Fashion, media, digital engagement, lifestyle branding, all of it operates independently of snap counts or depth charts. That creates a scenario owners are not used to managing, a player they can't financially pressure. When someone doesn't need the contract, negotiations change, fines become symbolic, public criticism loses its edge, even playing time stops being the ultimate threat. That's a dangerous shift for a league that relies on structure and hierarchy to function smoothly. There have been rumors, clearly unverified, that certain teams hesitated during the draft process because they didn't want the circus. Not because of talent, but because of scale. A player whose brand outgrows the building creates friction. Cameras follow him, questions shift, every decision becomes a headline. For some owners, that's opportunity. For others, it's a loss of control. Take the speculation involving Jimmy Haslam and internal tension narratives. Whether exaggerated or not, the reason those rumors stick is because they sound plausible. A player bigger than the franchise disrupts the traditional power balance. The owner is no longer the unquestioned center of gravity. And yet here's the irony. The same thing that allegedly makes owners nervous is also what makes the business explode. Jersey sales spike. Media attention becomes non-stop. valuations rise, relevance expands beyond regional markets into global conversation. The circus, if it exists, is profitable. That puts owners in a bind. You can't fully embrace the chaos without losing control. But you can't shut it down without sacrificing growth. The league wants stars, just not stars who operate outside the system. That's why this situation feels different. It's not rebellion in the traditional sense. There's no holdout, no public feud, no refusal to play. It's quieter than that. It's structural. It's a player proving that the league is no longer the only gatekeeper to wealth, influence, or visibility. And once that door is open, even a little, it doesn't just affect one locker room. It changes the math for everyone watching. This is where the entire story comes together, and it's also where it stops being about one player. Because what Shedeur Sanders has built isn't just a brand or a moment, it's a mindset the NFL was never designed to handle. For decades, the draft has been the league's ultimate control mechanism. It decides where you live, who you play for, how much you earn, and how much leverage you're allowed to have early in your career. It strips power from players before they ever step on the field. That's the point. And for most prospects, there's no way around it. But this situation exposed a crack in that system. The undraftable mindset doesn't mean a player can't be drafted. It means the draft no longer defines their value. It means slipping down the board doesn't destroy leverage, it just changes the conversation. When your income, relevance, and influence exist outside the league, the traditional pressure points stop working the way they're supposed to. That's why this makes people uneasy. Because if one player can prove that the rookie wage scale is optional, that brand equity can outweigh draft position, and that cultural relevance can outpace on-field opportunity, then the entire hierarchy starts to wobble. The league depends on timing. Earn later, speak later, matter later. This flips that timeline upside down. And here's the part that's easy to miss. This wasn't loud rebellion. There was no refusal to play, no public war with the league, no dramatic statements, just quiet independence, quiet leverage, quiet proof that the system can be navigated without total submission to it. That's far more dangerous than open defiance. Because now younger players are watching, not just quarterbacks, but receivers, defensive backs, anyone with a following. They're seeing that attention can be monetized early. That controversy isn't always harmful. That being talked about can matter more than being drafted high. And once that lesson sinks in, it doesn't go away. The NFL will still have power, it will still have structure, it will still decide who plays on Sundays, but it may no longer be the sole gatekeeper of wealth, influence, or relevance, and that's a future the league hasn't fully prepared for yet. So the real question is whether this works long-term for one player. The real question is what happens when 10 more players try it next. Because once the idea exists that you don't need permission to be valuable, the draft stops being the beginning of the story. It becomes just another chapter,